Hi, it's Mark Rye with HLB, and today we're talking about the secret to success with Microsoft 365. So what is the big secret? Let's get right to it. Microsoft 365 loves structure, and this isn't something you hear a lot about, but it makes a huge difference in the success of your deployment. So what do we mean by this? Often when we think of Microsoft 365, we think of the products that make up this platform. So Microsoft Teams, most people have heard of or use Microsoft Teams in some fashion. Microsoft SharePoint, OneDrive, Exchange Online, and then there's a whole host of business productivity apps beyond these as well. But we tend to think of the products as independent and having their own set of functionality, not necessarily as one cohesive platform. And that's where we really miss the full value of what 365 can provide. Why we tend to end up this way is a lot of times 365 gets out of the gate as an organic deployment. Someone will start using Teams, they're using it for video calls and then some chat messages, and then they're creating some teams. Someone else in the organization may start using a SharePoint site. Others are storing files in OneDrive. Exchange Online might be the underlying email system, but it all develops very organically without a lot of thought to the structure. Now, what's actually happening in the background is that as you're making these decisions about where to store content, who to invite to what teams and channels, you're actually starting to stack think of it as Lego blocks in the background in terms of how this should be organized. When there is a good foundation behind 365, the whole platform will sync and work very seamlessly together. When things are done organically, you end up with something that looks a little bit more like this in the background. So those blocks are actually being placed even though you don't realize it. So by creating teams and channels, by creating SharePoint sites, you're positioning these blocks, but there's not really the thought or the structure to it that's going to allow it to make sense over time. So what goes into making a cohesive information structure? Well, we're really talking about the security aspects, so the roles and the groups, and that's largely defined through Exchange Online. The organizational structure, so that's really the structure of the SharePoint and the what we would refer to as the team sites or the SharePoint sites. And then the folder structure within that. So how is information filed away and who has access to it? And then the communication channels through Microsoft Teams, which is really going to be the application that is used the most out of all of this on a day-to-day basis for the users to communicate and access files. So we want to make sure that everything in the platform is set up in a way that it can be accessed through Microsoft Teams, and that the user has everything at their fingertips in that interface, because that really is the primary interface for 365 that most users will be accessing through is Microsoft Teams. So we're talking about information structure, and that's really the foundation for a sound 365 deployment. Some of the methodologies that are commonly used to organize business information are SubjectBased, which is really thinking about naming things based on what they are, what their names are. So if I work at an IT company, we might have a top level folder by the name of Microsoft 365, as that's something that we're dealing a lot with. The problem is that changes over time. The naming might change, the products might change, and as soon as that happens, that kind of conventions, they break very easily. Organization-based structures similarly break very easily. So whether we're talking about individuals, roles, or departments, those things tend to have some fluidity to them over time in an organization, and rarely stand up for 5 or 10 years so that what you develop today would make sense. What has worked really well and has a long history of success in organizing information for business is function-based classification. And function-based, as it sounds, it focuses on the business functions at the top level. So HR, finance, professional services. And when we do that, we can create a structure that makes sense for the business today, but will also flex and grow with the business over time so that it will continue to be valid and offer value 5 or 10 years down the road. When we marry up this function-based classification, which is really a methodology that's been used to deploy SharePoint and other document management systems for decades, so this is really nothing new, but it's not something that's really talked about a lot. When we marry up this function-based classification with the 365 infrastructure, it maps really well. And let me show you what I mean here. So the classification structure really is mapped out in this way. So we have business functions at the top. Within a function, we have the business activities that support that function. And then subject and topic is the way we're going to organize things further down. It just so happens that business functions map really well to teams and team sites in 365, and that the activities map really well to channels within teams. So it gives us this way that we can use a solid classification structure or information structure as the basis and map it directly into these components of 365, which we need to configure. When we get this right, Microsoft 365 will allow your users to have access to the people, the information, the communications that they need all within one interface. And largely that's going to be the Microsoft Teams interface. So there won't be disconnects, there won't be emails that need to go internally, there won't be attachments that are sent. The information is all where you would expect it to be, and everybody can pull and work from that one copy, that one source of the truth or one source of that information in a very simple and productive way. The other thing with this is this entire information structure is going to be available not just on your desktop, but through the Teams the mobile app as well. So full access to communications and file system can be provided. So this structure really serves us to get away from being anchored to a server or a file system of some point, and really making our information and communications available wherever we are. If you're interested in learning more about Microsoft 365, HLB has been deploying Microsoft 365 for many years, and we have expertise in-house to help you with the information management or information structure parts of this that really go so far and add so much to the success of your project. Feel free to give us a call or reach out by email, and we'd be glad to discuss.